Death Makes a Comeback by James O'Keefe. Violent death was no novelty to Sergeant James Peyton. He had seen far worse than a brunette with a bruise on her forehead and a slit throat. He felt as if he had just touched a live wire. He wide-eyed the older detective. "Dad." Lieutenant Lawrence Peyton raised a cautionary hand. "Please, Jimmy," he dropped his voice. "I wish I'd never told you about him." "But the M.O." "Shh. The husband hears you. Spread the rumor he's back." He glanced at the bedroom door as if expecting something to enter and devour them. Lucy Welch's long hair spread out like a nun's veil on the gray carpet beneath. Her brown eyes stared up at Jimmy. She wore a red tube top and tight black designer jeans. How perfectly color-wise her top and lipstick coordinated with her throat. Jimmy hoped his necrophilic fantasies weren't too obvious. He must mention that to Dr. Larson tomorrow. Jimmy Peyton was a fat little boy in a blonde, blue-eyed hunk's disguise. He had fooled many women, since he always took off before the disguise slipped. Lieutenant Peyton surveyed the huge, decadently ornate bedroom. He was a great, bloated version of his son with a cloud-gray crew cut. Judging by that crap on the dressing table, she liked spending money. Or knew how to get some guy to spend it for her. Lieutenant Peyton winked approvingly, which gave Jimmy a glow, then turned his attention to the bed. Black silk sheets. Now what does that tell you? "I don't think you should jump to conclusions, Dad. You want to get to my rank? You'd better." The glow faded. The Welch living room was expensively furnished, spotlessly clean, and coldly neat. Jimmy couldn't wait to leave it. George Welch had a thin, vinegary face and rust-colored hair parted down the middle. "I understand," said Lieutenant Peyton. "You were divorced?" "Separated," said Welch, as if he were about to have the lieutenant beheaded. "We were happily married, but we were having difficulties, so we decided to spend some time apart." "I see. So what happened tonight?" "We were supposed to go to dinner and that play at the Birmingham Theater. I came by to get her, and I found her like that." Jimmy noted Welch's granite formality. Indifference to his wife's death? Shock? Or something else? "Did you," asked Lieutenant Peyton, "notice anything unusual as you pulled up?" Welch hesitated. "No." "Sure?" "I'm sure." "Okay, now, did your wife have any enemies?" "Yes." Like he was a cat and the question was a nice juicy mouse. "She recently became friendly. Just friendly with a man named Eric Dimke. According to Lucy, he was used to getting his way with women, and when she turned him down, he didn't take it well." "What did he do?" "She wouldn't tell me, but I got the impression she was scared of him." "You know where this guy lives?" "He gave them an address in Flat Rock." "Think he's telling the truth?" asked Jimmy, back in the car. "Not completely. Maybe not at all. Not about the trial separation, that's for sure. Once she got her hands on his money in that house, that little bitch was through with him." "And all you need to jump to conclusion about that his eyes?" The address was in a sparsely populated area. They turned into a driveway, the headlights revealing a bedraggled Oldsmobile parked so close to the road they almost rear-ended it. They crossed what Jimmy felt on his ankles like a balding, unmowed lawn. Lieutenant Peyton sidestepped something. "Look out for this junk." A lone street lamp and light from the house dimly illuminating scattered auto innards. "I don't believe it," said Jimmy. "Believe what?" "That a woman as well off as her would take up with anyone who lived here." Now he's jumping to conclusions. The big black leather reclining chair was the only piece of furniture in that room that did not need reupholstering. Distinctive in a room whose walls bore cheap prints of flowers, gleaming on an unshampooed rug, and as anyone who had known him 10 minutes might have expected, Eric Dimke occupied it. He was a great bronzed ape with a creamy white Elvis pompadour. As he leaned back, his unbuttoned shirt spread open, displaying his pectorals. Only Jimmy seemed to notice the woman. She viewed the proceedings as she had greeted the Peytons at the door, with dumb, animal indifference through which muted anger only occasionally flickered. Blotches marred otherwise satisfactory features. Lieutenant Peyton repeated Welch's accusations. "He's full of it." "Did you know Mrs. Welch?" asked the lieutenant. "Sure I knew her. Lots of guys knew her. She was hanging around the flat top bar, I don't know, 5, 6 weeks before it got talky to her. What would a woman from Indian Village be doing in a bar around here? Dimke shrugged. I wouldn't go to no bars in Detroit after dark. I got the idea she went to bars all over the place. I mean, she was looking for action. Or maybe she just didn't want to go to no bars around where she lived because she thought her old man might catch her. She was afraid of him? I think she was. I got the idea he was this wimp she just married for his money. And I asked her why she just didn't leave him. And she said, that's something I'd rather not go into. And she got this funny look in her eyes. You know what I mean? Yeah. You got to know Mrs. Welch quite well, didn't you? Dimke's face went cold. Like, what do you mean? Well, she told you about her marriage. She told you about other bars she went to. Welch knew your name and address, which kind of suggests she did too. I mean, you can't blame us for jumping to conclusions. Jimmy flinched. Another shrug. So I let her talk to me. So I let her think I was coming on to her. He and Lieutenant Peyton studied each other. So maybe I was. Hey, I've been married, 12 years? I used to be real big with the ladies, so I let some fine-looking chick make some moves on me, show me I still got it. Even the most happily married man's got to do that or he gets stale. Right, ho? I guess so. They were precinct-bound. What do you think of his story? Asked Jimmy. Story's fine, but did you notice Mrs. Dimke's wrists? Jimmy vaguely recalled bruises. And the way she acted? She acted bored. She acted scared. She was scared to let us see how scared she was, so she held herself in. There's plenty she could tell us, but she knows what he'll do to her if she does. So it's between Welch and Dimke. One thing's for sure, it wasn't him. Him? Lieutenant Peyton grinned. You know. The lieutenant flipped on his office light. The bloodstains show she was killed in the bedroom, and there was no sign of a struggle, so it was evidently someone she trusted. He started going through the mail on his desk. I mean, can you see anyone letting him get that close and in her bedroom yet? He glanced at one of the envelopes, starting moving it to the bottom, then glanced at it again. His face went blank. What's wrong, Dad? The old man struggled to smile. Now, you got me doing it. Where's the letter opener? He went through his top drawer, then the second drawers on each side, then the next, growing more frantic with each drawer. Where the hell's that damn letter opener? Dad! He grabbed the envelope and ripped off an edge. Lieutenant Peyton snatched it back, clawed out the paper inside, shook it open, and read it. He offered it to his son with a trembling hand, looking as if he were going to vomit. The hand-printed words flew up like fists. Lucy Welch was my return performance. Mephistopheles. Jimmy foggily heard his father. First good hunch you had since you got promoted out of uniform, and it had to be about him. The bar was on the first level of the Renaissance Center. It was a slow night. The bartender and all but two of the patrons were engrossed in a televised Tigers game. The Peyton sat hunched over his drink. In the dim red glow, remembering 7 years ago. Lieutenant Peyton recalled a young blonde, nude, on a morgue slab. Her face was like the wholesome farm girls on the cover of his folks' American magazines, except for the lump on her head and gash across the throat. An officer read from a notebook. Her name was Helen Dunn, 23 years old. She was a barmaid. He named a bar near Wayne State University. Her boss was emptying out some trash right after opening when he found her body behind some cans. Had there been any trouble recently? Nothing in particular, but you know how barmaids are. Yeah. He replaced the sheet, wondering how to say what he had to say without revealing too much. He decided it was impossible. I want this to have top priority. I want to know who works there, who drinks there, everything. Something special about this, sir? Maybe I just don't like to see 23-year-old girls die. He was not fooling the officer. He did not care. The something special was a printed note now in his desk drawer. Helen Dunn begins her beauty sleep tonight. It's going to be a long one, Mephistopheles. Anyone can write a note, blame a personal killing on a fictional psychopath. The police investigated the murder with more than usual diligence, but spread no alarms. Peyton dismissed the note as a blind a week and a half later, but spent the next 2 months going through his mail on the brink of cardiac arrest. He had just stopped fearing the postal deliveries when the second note arrived. I'm afraid Tracy Huggins won't have much time for studying from now on, but that doesn't matter. She's never going to graduate. Mephistopheles. He shut off his feelings and scoured the day's reports, then called every Huggins in the phone book. He went home with no idea who Tracy Huggins was. The next morning during coffee, someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was another detective. Were you the one who was looking for Tracy Huggins? Yes. Her folks just reported her missing. She hasn't been seen since leaving class at Wayne State 2 nights ago. Judy Franklin was Lucy Welch's sister. Lieutenant Peyton could see a resemblance muddied by drink and fat. Her brown boy-length hair was flecked with gray. Her face was cosmetically embalmed. She had a Georgia accent. That wimp she married didn't kill her, that boyfriend did. We have them under observation, ma'am. You should have their rear ends in jail. Why? Her body tightened with rage. I mean, what makes you suspect them? He took his notebook from a drawer, placed it open on the desk, and poised a pen over it. She relaxed a little. I only met Welch once back in 1977 when Lucy brought him home for a 4th of July picnic. They weren't married yet. Think she just met him. Didn't like him then. Every time I turned around, he was hanging around her, or he wasn't far away, watching her. And the way he watched her. I've been in enough bars to know when a man watches you that way, you don't want no part of him. Couldn't understand what she seen in him till I found out he had money. Some of his feelings about that must have shown on his face. Well, you didn't have to live on what was left of your daddy's paycheck from his ladies and his drinking. So you met him only once and you're basing a murder accusation on that? That and the letters she sent me. He was just like I thought he was, jealous and clingy and all around weird. Do you have any of these letters? Not now, I don't. I threw them out a long time ago. Well, aren't you a sentimental bitch? So all you have against Welch is hearsay? What about Dimke? She tensed again. I suppose you'd say that was hearsay too, especially since she never said nothing outright. But a sister knows. You just don't go out there. He lives out in Flat Rock. And take a look at his wife. He could have done that to her. He could have done this to Lacey. Good point. He thought it best not to mention having already done so and coming to the same conclusion, or seeking someone much deadlier than Welch or Dimke, or that he was now drawing an unflattering caricature of the mayor de Detroit. Lieutenant Peyton was obviously uneasy the next few days. He finally told Jimmy why over lunch. Remember the last time I was after this guy, and I came home one night, real nervous, and glanced over my shoulder like I thought someone was following me, and you and your mother wanted to know why? Jimmy searched his memory, then shook his head. But now that you mention it, was someone following you? Maybe. I don't know. That was after Tracy Huggins disappeared. Her folks came to headquarters, raised hell. Said I should have told the papers about the first note. Then they would have known. Then they could have done something. Stuff like that. Heard they hung around the rest of the day, still pretty steamed up. Made me kind of paranoid. What did they do when her body was found? I got a phone call the next day. They just said satisfied, then hung up. I could tell it was Huggins. Dad? Yes. Did she bring it all back? The old man's brows twitched. I've seen her in the halls. He was referring to Judy Franklin. Jimmy brought Dr. Larson up to date. From Judy Franklin's mouth to the doctor's ear, the story was naturally mangled, though at one point survived, and finally someone saw its significance. She won't leave us alone, said Jimmy. She won't let us do our job. Well, said Dr. Larson, she gave you information that, on the face of it, was worth checking out. And as far as she can see, you didn't, and you won't explain why. The commissioner wants us to keep a lid on it. He thinks this guy might be a copycat. Says he never heard of a psychopath starting up again years later in the same area. Tell the commissioner for me that if psychos obeyed rules, they wouldn't be psychos. Unless he had reasons he didn't want to talk about. What do you mean? Nothing. The point is, you don't seem to be satisfied with knowing you're doing the best you can. The victim's sister's gotta see it. I mean, if you desperately need to have everybody approve of you, how the hell are you ever going to arrest anybody? He glanced at his watch, which might be a good thing to think about until next week. Jimmy counted out Dr. Larson's fee. I guess Mephistopheles has become kind of our obsession. Then my bet's on him. Why? Obsessed people can't think straight. Try some relaxation when you get to your desk in the morning. Jimmy hesitated as he laid a $5 bill on the pile. I noticed you became thoughtful when I told you what she said, like something occurred to you. You'll never give up trying to turn me into a consultant. Did something occur to you? Okay, if I tell you, will you remember it was your idea? Sure. And this is the last time you asked me for advice? Agreed. Then here it is. Jimmy went looking for a certain book of photographs which he found after 2 difficult days. That night he took the book to a certain bar. Helen Dunn's boss scanned the page in which Jimmy was interested and, without prompting, singled out the right man. This guy. I know I seen him hanging around here bothering Helen not long before it happened. He scanned the rest of the page. I recognize some of these other people too, but if you're looking for someone who was bothering her, this guy. The rest were dead ends. The Hugginses slammed the door at the mere mention of his name. The owner of the singles bar stared at him. 7 years ago? I can't even remember who the hell was here last night. Julie McKinnon's acquaintances were far away by now. He was wasting time. Time enough for Patty Bukowski to leave her East Detroit home and her husband of 3 years, Gil, because things were getting too crazy. Time enough for her to move to a downtown Detroit apartment building to experience being answerable to no one. She spent the first evening in Hart Plaza on the great terraced stone structure that overlooked the darkness of the Detroit River. She was too absorbed in the solitude and the glow of the Windsor skyline at sunset to notice him until he sat beside her. Patty gave up 2.5 weeks later, only partly because she missed Gil. She was afraid of a man who had seemed so nice at Hart Plaza. Gil had suggested she wait until tomorrow, but what could be the harm of going home tonight? Patty! She turned, feeling as if she had just stepped off a 1,000-foot cliff. Oh, hi. Where are you going? I don't think that's any of your business. You're going back to him, aren't you? She looked for her car key. If she ignored him, he would most likely get the hint. She did not see him reach into his pocket, take out a small chain, weld it to a sinker and 2 slugs, and raise it over his head. Patty, he cooed. What? Hold it right there. A figure emerged from the shadows, waving a gun at the man. Up against the car and spread the feet. Jimmy Peyton showed her his credentials, read the suspect his rights, and patted him down. He found a switchblade knife, on which flecks of blood were later discovered, and an envelope addressed to Lieutenant Peyton. It contained a hand-printed note. Gil Bukowski's waiting for his wife to come home. He'll have a long wait, Mephistopheles. I know this guy, said Patty. So do we. George Welch. I decided, said Jimmy at his next session with Dr. Larson. I gotten as far as I could with Welch's yearbook, and if he was really killing them because they rejected him like you said, I better just shadow him until he made his next move. He shook his head. Dad must have asked 7 years ago about guys they were having trouble with. Pretty girls don't always comment on every guy who gets too persistent. There's just too many of them, and I doubt Welch's victims realized how sick he was. But how did you know it was him? Dr. Larson's face soured. I didn't know diddly. I just made some good guesses. Like, he lied about what he was doing at the scene of the crime, which I hear you cops have a way of considering suspicious. I mean, we're supposed to believe she was dressed the way you say she was because she expected the kind of guy you say Welch was? Come now. And it would answer your father's question. You know, why would Lucy Welch let Mephistopheles walk right up to her in her own bedroom, until recently it had been his bedroom too? But the closest I came to a brilliant deduction like William Powell and Warner Oland and Basil Rathbone and all those old movies was, 7 years ago in June, the Mephistopheles murders mysteriously stopped. 1 month later, Welch turns up at a 4th of July party engaged to Lucy, And no sooner does Lucy dump Welch than Mephistopheles comes out of retirement and makes her his next victim. I mean, I wouldn't hang anybody on that, but it does bear checking. Now that I've answered your question, I got one. Okay. Why were you so hung up on this guy? Jimmy was still trying to formulate an answer when the doctor added, in other words, how much of you do you see in him? He had a way of returning abruptly to the point.